Thank you. Please be seated, everybody. Well, firstly, welcome to today's full council meeting, and in particular, welcome to members of the public who are attending in the public gallery, those in the conference hall, and those watching the meeting via our YouTube channel. For those in the building, I'd like to draw your attention to the emergency evacuation procedures. In the event of emergency, please leave the chamber by the nearest exit, possibly the way you came in, and congregate in front of the cathedral. As with any council meeting, please treat each other with due courtesy, tolerance, and respect. May I also extend a special welcome to our new permanent Chief Executive, Nick Hibbard, for his very first full council meeting. It's delighted to see you here, Nick. Thank you very much indeed. And could I also remind everyone to turn off their mobile phones or put them to silent mode to avoid disrupting the meeting too much. So we now move on to agenda item 2, apologies for... Oh, Councillor Clark.
Sorry, Lord Mayor, and sorry to introduce this right at the beginning of the meeting. I just wondered if you would consider having an extended break before the motions this afternoon so that each group can get together and have a decent conversation about how we move forward. And I would like to propose a 20-minute break, if that's acceptable with you.
I mean, normally do we have a 15-minute break? So it's not too dissimilar. So I'm happy to agree to a 20-minute break before we go to the motions. That would be fine.
Most appreciated. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you very much, everyone. So agenda item 2 is apologies for absence. I received apologies from Councillors Breyer, Calashone, Johnson, Martin and O'Rourke. Are there any other apologies? Okay, thank you very much. So agenda item 3 is declarations of interest. Can I ask whether any councillors have any interest to declare regarding the items on today's agenda? Okay, agenda item 4 is minutes of the previous meeting. I move that the minutes of the previous meeting of full council held on the 10th of December 2024 be agreed as a correct record. Do I have a seconder?
I rise to second the minutes and reserve my remarks, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Councillor Wilcox. Can I take it then that the minutes are agreed? A bit more enthusiasm than that, surely. Thank you very much, everyone. So now we move on to agenda item 5, which is Lord Mayor's business. As noted at the previous meeting, Alderman Jeff Lovell sadly passed away last year. Jeff's family requested that we delay holding a memorial until today's meeting so that they would be able to attend. And I'm delighted to say we have a coachload of Jeff's family with us today, and it was a pleasure to meet them all earlier before today's meeting, and I wish them a very warm welcome, and I hope you enjoy, for want of a better word, today's tribute. So welcome indeed. So first, I'd like to call on Councillor Tony Dyer to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Councillor Dyer, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and it is a mixture of sadness and honour to stand up to speak about Jeff. And I'm also speaking not just on behalf of the Green Group, but also my family. My mum grew up in the same street that Jeff lives in, or lived in, and I did ask around some of my older relatives, and some of whom still live in the OS, for their memories of Jeff, and essentially you can boil it down to just one phrase: he was a thoroughly decent human being. He was a fantastic guy, the king of Noah West. I think I'm an Arcliffe boy myself, and one of the many things that Arcliffe and Noah West people share in common is that they tell you what you think. They aren't afraid to let you know if they think you're an idiot or if they think you're making mistakes. They'll be straight up. And if you add on to that the idea of also becoming an elected councillor for Bristol City Council, then you're pushing your luck a bit further. And then to become Lord Mayor, you're kind of pushing it to the extreme boundary of what people from Noah West or Arcliffe are going to say about you. But I can guarantee you can knock on every single door in Lower West, in Low and in Hartcliffe, and you won't find somebody who have a bad word to say about Jeff Lovell, because he was that unique thing. A hard-working, conscientious, honest, transparent, funny, or for about 50% of his jokes had Jacko as the punchline. But I think the other thing is that nobody described him as a politician, because he wasn't. He wasn't a politician. He didn't get involved in that party politics stuff. What Jeff wanted to do was to serve his community. That's why he got involved, why he sat in his chamber and why he served it so well, is that devotion to his community. That stands out. In a moment, Paul is going to talk about some other things, but there's just a few other things I wanted to say about Jeff, is that when I first came into the council, I was very nervous, as a working class kid with a speech impediment, A few of us now here are from, there's a couple more Hartcliffe people in the, sat in the area, and we need some more Lower Westers as well. And you'll hear from an adopted Lower Wester in a moment. But what I think is that people like Jeff give encouragement to people like me, people like Kerry, people like Kirsty, to put ourselves forward. Because once you see somebody else doing it, and you see somebody else doing it so well, you start to think, well, maybe, no, my Bristolian accent isn't that bad. Maybe people aren't going to take the mick of me and not listen to me. So I'll just finish by saying, I already miss Jeff. He was that epitome of a nice guy, and I'm sure his family miss him so much more than I do. And I'm so glad so many of them are here today. All the very best for Jeff. I'm sure he's looking down on us at the moment. He'll probably have his own comments to make about some of the speeches he's about to hear. And I think I probably should shut up before I tell up. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tony, for those really heartfelt words. So now we're here from Councillor Paul Goggin, who's speaking on behalf of the Labour Group. Paul.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. And it's lovely to see the family again here today. I'm here to pay tribute to former Lord Mayor and Alderman Lovell, Jeff, my mate. I've been given a list of committees and duties and so forth that he sat on. And if I listed all those, I wouldn't be able to speak about the man himself. So there's two words that come to mind, especially when I think of Jeff: love and pride. He was immensely proud of his fire service career, his time as a councillor, and especially his time as Lord Mayor. In fact, he was buried in his robes. So proud he was that a working class Wester could become Bristol's first citizen. The other word is love. Jeff loved the fire service, he loved the Labour Party, he loved his service to the city, he loved his fishing, he loved his mates. He loved being Lord Mayor, he loved his folk house, and thankfully for me, although Jacko would disagree, he loved United as well. But the most important thing to him always, and which I haven't mentioned when I've talked about his pride and his love, are his family. Former Lady Mayoress Bridge, Kelly, Joanne, Scott, Charlotte, Caden, Amy, Jess and Willow, his grandchildren, and all the rest of his family, obviously. He was so proud of you, and he loved you without end. And we were proud and loved him back. His funeral was testament to that. It was standing room only, and there was an honour guard from the service. So farewell, Jeff. We'll miss you, mate. And I hope that United's last couple of performances have at least cheered you somewhat. Thank you.
Thank you, Paul. And now I'd like to call on Councillor Joss Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group. Councillor Clark, please.
Thank you very much indeed. I feel privileged to be able to speak about Jeff today, especially as his friends and family are here to share this time with us. When I think of Jeff, there are three abiding passions which have obviously been already spoken about, but are worth, I think, reiterating. And I'm sure that our thoughts of Jeff will be fairly similar, actually, it sounds. He was a real family man, a real Nor'wester, and passionate about his life as a firefighter. And obviously, he was a superb councillor and a real man of the people. He was really clear about his motivation and what he felt needed defending. And ultimately, the community he served as a councillor was all the better for his representing it. He was closely connected to his community, and he served his community, which meant that he knew what was going on and could advocate for all of his residents. So when I was Lord Mayor, a few years after Jeff, I would frequently go to events and meet people who spoke very fondly about the time that they'd met Jeff and his wife. They told me of a warm person with a really down-to-earth nature, and he was a real privilege. And his memory lived on even sort of when I met them years after they'd met him themselves. So thank you very much for all attending here today. I've just looked up there and it's bad. Sorry. So thank you very much, Lord Mayor. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss. And finally, I'd like to call upon Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. Richard.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It was my privilege to know Alderman Jeff Lovell for the 15 years he served as councillor for Fulwood. In my view, Jeff was triply blessed. Firstly, and to me, I think this was undoubtedly the blessing he viewed as the most prized. He was utterly devoted to his wife Bridget and his two daughters and son and the families they had. And it's wonderful they're here to hear these tributes today. Secondly, Jeff was actually raised, lived and actually represented a South Bristol seat. And as you know, that's the best part of Bristol, although arguably one may be somewhat prejudiced or biased. Thirdly, Jeff was incredibly blessed by actually sharing and having two succeeding, very fulfilling vacations. Primarily during his working life, he was, of course, an Avon firefighter. Now, those of you, such as yourself, Lord Mayor, and myself, who serve on Avon Fire Authority, know your admiration for, and the debt we owe to the men and women of that service is legendary. And it goes on and on. So well done, and thank you from Greater Bristol, Jeff. Following his retirement, he of course became the councillor with, of course, his dear friend Chris Jacko Jackson for Fulwood. And we know, as Paul Goggins already said, he served on almost every committee. He knew this body inside and out. Clearly, I think to have such a close friend, Jacko Jackson, as his running mate, his fellow councillor, was an additional blessing, although, as Paul said, for some reason, Jacko seemed to be the butt of most of Jeff's jokes, of course. Although his council career was properly crowned by being Lord Mayor of this fantastic city, at heart, I believe Jeff was a solid champion for Fulwood, and he'd want to be known as that, and he will be remembered as that. Again, Councillor Goggin referred to Jeff's funeral before Christmas. As he said, we had an honour guard of 2 serving firefighters, and the Assistant Chief Fire Officer was there too. We also had Councillor Goggin, Deputy Lord Mayor, representing this city council, and many serving and former councillors. Though, to my mind, the greatest tribute of all was, as Paul has mentioned, the vast numbers at that funeral. Clearly, there was, as Paul said, only standing room at the end. And clearly, those people, those Bristolians, viewed Jeff rightly with great affection and respect for all he represented and had done over the years. So, Jeff, thank you very much for a Bristolian life well lived.
Well, thank you everyone for those really warm words, those wonderful tributes, and I hope that's some comfort for Jeff's family who are here today. Thank you so much for attending today. Great to see you all. So now we're going to, thank you. So now we're going to move on to agenda item 6, which is public forum. 30 minutes will be allowed for this item, which is split into 15 minutes for petitions and statements and 15 minutes for questions. Details of the petitions, statements and questions received have been published on our website. I'll go through the list, calling on those that have indicated they plan to attend the meeting. Speakers are asked to pay attention to the traffic lights on the dais and to start to wrap up when the lights turn to amber. Now, there are no public forum petitions received for this meeting. There were a total of 34 public statements received, and a list will be displayed on the screen. 14 members of the public indicated that they plan to attend and speak to their statements. They are displayed on the screen, and we'll run through those statements in order. I'll invite each person to speak for 1 minute. Please summarise your statement and bear in mind they were published for councillors and the public to read in advance of the meeting. Now, I'd like to start with the representatives from the care experienced community. Are they here today? Okay, thank you.
We're all here today to speak on the behalf of the care experienced community living in Bristol. When a child comes into care, they do not have a choice. It is of no fault of their own, but for some reason society will still judge them for this decision. Why should we continue to carry this burden? We feel that making care experience a locally protected characteristic is important for several reasons.
Care experienced individuals often face discrimination and stigma throughout their lives, including in education, employment and housing. Treating care experience as a locally protected characteristic helps to recognise and address these systematic barriers. One person has shared that he felt discriminated from health services for a long-term condition he has because he was a child in care. His health professionals made assumptions about his weight based on his time being in care, when in fact he had a medical condition that was the underlying cause. We have also had statements from young people in children's homes about going to university without being able to come back to stay in the holidays, leaving them feeling lonely and isolated when their peers return to their families.
By treating care experience as a local protected characteristic, Bristol City Council can ensure that policies and procedures are inclusive, promoting equal opportunities for care experienced individuals. This motion can increase public awareness of the challenges faced by care experienced individuals, giving greater empathy and understanding within the community. Care experienced individuals such as ourselves have often poor life outcomes compared to their peers. By treating care experience as a local protected characteristic, we can help to reduce their inequalities by ensuring that they receive fair treatment and access to necessary resources.
Bristol City Council are our corporate parent. We feel that this motion will show their continued support in improving the lives of children and young people who are in their care. We no longer want to follow society's judgment of the decisions adults made on our behalf.
Okay, thank you. Well done, everyone. It's very nerve-wracking speaking up there, isn't it, on full display, but you did very well. And we look forward to debating the motion later. Thank you so much. So let's move on to Caroline Dunn. Is Caroline here? Yes. And Caroline, you're speaking on the issue of Make Bristol an Accessible City. You've got 1 minute, please, Caroline.
Okay, Lord Mayor, Councillors, my statement is essentially a genuine massive cri de coeur. You need to put disabled people and the impact of your planning decisions upon them front and centre in every decision you make. I have not felt that you do, and the previous regime most certainly did not. Bristol is already a very segregated city. Bristol City Council has been making it more so. You may well not realise it is very difficult to keep friends once you become disabled, and even more difficult to make new ones. We need help to maintain our independence, not steamroller ideology. Bristol needs a compassionate heart. We are just as important to the economy anyway. Since the building of Catalonia 9,000 years ago and onwards, we know town planning has reflected people's beliefs and value system, and frequently with last century's new towns, unfortunately, also stupidity. As a small child, my encyclopedia had lovely bright visions of the future. The women had pennies and were never astronauts. The men drove cars and never did housework. The town centres had greenery and lovely pedestrianised bits. Never any disabled people at all, not even traditional white stick or wheelchairs. Your pictures still have no disabled people. This is 60 years ago. This is 60 years forward.
Caroline,
can we please have some progress? Thank you very much.
Thank you, Caroline. Thank you very much. Next, is Lama Kidan here? Lama. Yeah, so you're talking about the Avon Pension Fund. Remember, you've got 1 minute, please.
Councillors, I urge you to vote for the Green Party's divestment motion today. There's no legal or moral justification not to. If you vote against this today, then you will be signalling your support for genocide and apartheid, which are being facilitated by the 20 million invested in the Avon Pension Fund. You are making us, as the taxpayer, complicit in the direct and intentional targeting of healthcare workers, journalists, and innocent civilians. So far, Israel has killed 18,000 children. That's 42 per day. 42 per day. 73% of the public are calling for an immediate ceasefire. 67% of them are Conservative voters, and 86% of them are Labour voters. Only 18% of people, 18% of people, there's at least, the only people who approve of how Labour is handling the current situation in Gaza is 18%. Do not make us complicit in the murder of innocent people. Do not make me complicit in the oppression and murder of my own people. There are reports that are coming in at the moment of children being admitted to hospital with sniper bullets to the head and the chest. How will you claim plausible deniability? How will you justify this? Please pass the divestment motion today. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Lama. And now let's move to Nigel Varley. Is Nigel here? Yes. So Nigel, you have a statement on cladding remediation. 1 minute, please.
Yeah, surprised to be here again. I'm sure you are. After banging on about it for a year, these payments have actually finally been made. All right, but I really urge you to read the statement, because the way in which they're being paid is absolutely disgraceful. It's been made, first of all, it's been delayed and delayed and delayed. It's been made as difficult as possible for people to claim the money back, because it goes into their rent account. It's not paid directly as cash. You have to phone up and claim it back. It could have been paid in November, but it's been delayed, so people didn't get it in time for Christmas. And 148 quid may not be enough, but it's important for people. It would have been important to have it before Christmas, and most people aren't going to get it till way into January. But the worst thing is the issue that arrears are going to be deducted from it. Now, you may think, well, that's fair enough. If people are in arrears, we ought to have it back. I have to tell you that last year, for 6 weeks, I was in arrears for up to 250 quid. But I paid by direct debit. I was in arrears because of technical reasons about the way that rent is collected. And people on universal credit are always in arrears because it's paid in arrears. So people are going to lose that money that should have been gone for additional heating costs by the removal of cladding. And basically, it's the revenge of the officers who have always been opposed to this and have tried to sabotage
Nigel, can you wrap it up? Have you finished? Thank you very much. Thank you. Okay, is Melissa Topping here? Yeah. Melissa, you've got a statement on the East Bristol Liberal neighbourhood.
Speaking on behalf of the Lawrence Hill Neighbourhood Forum, we hereby urge the full council to unanimously agree to halt the EBLN and allow for reassessment, re-engaging with stakeholders and revisiting the consultation process based on evidence that consultation shows disability groups have been invented. Disabled walkabouts mentioned did not and could not have taken place with mobility impaired disabled, i.e. those that rely on vehicles. Where these were advertised is also a mystery. Elderly and disabled residents have been completely ignored. 3 care homes have already been blocked in, along with Lincoln Gardens residential home, all against wishes of residents. Impact assessment has not been, the impact assessment has been ignored. Stakeholder engagement were not transparent, and these are not in support of this scheme. Emergency service crews need consulting fully, with recordings made available to the public. Data and evidence of these schemes working is not available. We urge you to reverse the travesty that has been pushed and start again with the involvement of the community, designing a neighbourhood livable for all. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Melissa. Eldin Farmy has also indicated they would like to speak. Is Eldin here? Eldin, your statement is on divesting from companies linked to Israel. You've got 1 minute, please.
Thank you. I'm not going to repeat the statement. You will have already seen that statement. But to make a direct appeal to councillors to please support this motion, what Israel's doing in Gaza, we think this is genocide. These are war crimes, breaches of humanitarian law. It's clear for anybody who wants to see that what the truth is that's going on the ground in Gaza and has been for the last 15 months. We don't need to rehearse the list of casualties. We've seen over these months Israel's repeated breaches of international law, Israel's repeated attacks on a captive population with nowhere to go. It is time for our councillors and our city to stand up for international law, to stand up for ethics in global politics. I know all of our councillors will have got involved in politics, involved as councillors because they want to do something positive for our community and beyond. This is one opportunity to do that. So please, I hope that you don't treat this as a party political issue. Please listen to your conscience on this. We know what Israel is doing.
Eldin, could you stop now, please?
Divestment can make a real impact.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you. Thank you, Eldin. Is Mike Oldreeve here? Mike Oldreeve? No. Okay. Would Youssef Ezat like to speak? Yes. Okay. And your topic is the Avon Pension Fund. You've got 1 minute, please, Youssef.
Despite the genocide unfolding in Gaza, where more than 40,000 civilians have been killed, including 16,000 children, and destruction of Kamal Adwan Hospital in northern Gaza, and the rest of the medical staff, including Dr. Abu Safia, who's the manager of the hospital, our government, both Conservative and Labour government, are complicit in sending weapons daily following this massacre. On October 11, 2023, Keir Starmer openly stated, yes, Labour, Keir Starmer openly said that Israel have the right to cut power and water from Gaza, justifying collective punishment and starvation as a weapon of war. It's a shame, but the public is not fault. All councillors today, please vote for the movement. All the councillors who choose to not vote for the movement or trying to make unadjustable amendments will be seen as in the public eyes as complicit in violation of international law and complicit in a genocide. Please do not prioritize your party politics over your moral value. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. Is Matt Sanders here today? Yes, he is. Hello, Matt. So Matt's got a statement on bus gates and the East Bristol Liberal neighbourhood. One minute, please, Matt.
Hi. Over the last 8 months, I've repeatedly brought the Council's attention to defects in the Cumberland Road bus gate. In public statements, officers claim the signage installed is compliant with the latest guidance and legislation from the Department of Transport. This is simply not true. The DFT's latest guidance is the Traffic Signs Manual, which specifies appropriate dimensions for signs. For instance, in Gasferry Road, the highways officers have installed signs which are this big. But the manual says they should be this big. I had some cardboard ones, but they were confiscated. I don't know if you can tell the difference from over there, but this one is small, and this one is far away. The same officers responsible for the Cumberland Road bus gate are currently installing 3 more bus gates in the East Bristol livable neighbourhood. They've already put up signs with exactly the same mistakes on several roads. To mess up one bus gate may be regarded as a misfortune, but to mess up 3 more looks like either gross incompetence or deliberate sabotage to drum up additional revenue.
Matt, I'm going to have to stop you at that point. But thank you very much for getting the Father Ted reference in today. We've got time for one more statement, then we'll go on to public questions. So is Eileen Kay here today? Eileen, you've got a statement on divesting from companies linked to Israel.
Thank you. I'm going to read a different statement, as you've all probably read the statement that was submitted. I stand before you all today to urge you to support the motion calling for a ceasefire and for divestment. Gaza right now is at the heart of history and at the heart of a global struggle for justice. By backing this motion, you will become part of this, and you will show your moral clarity and your political courage. And you will make Bristol a shining example for the rest of the world to follow. The enormity of this crime goes way beyond party politics. There's a new report that came out this week from the Lancet Medical Journal that says that the 45,000 dead is a gross underestimate. And the number of secondary deaths is astronomical. So please, I ask you to put your political differences aside and to consider the colossal scale and the historic weight and gravity of what we are faced against.
Eileen, thank you. I'll stop you there. Thank you so much indeed. We'll get on with the questions, if that's okay. So regarding public questions, 36 questions were received from members of the public and 8 of those have indicated that they wish to attend. We'll try to cover as many questions as possible in the 15 minutes available. It may not be possible for everyone to speak, so we ask for your patience as we run through the questions in order. And please remember, everyone will get a written response to any questions submitted. So when I call on you, your question will be displayed on the screen. The leader or relevant chair will reply verbally to your question. Following the reply, you'll be invited to ask a supplementary question. Remember, you've got a maximum of 2 supplementary questions. So first up, we've got public question number 2 from Salem Bennett on transparency from councillors. Is Salem here? Yeah. First, Salem, we're going to hear the response from Councillor Dyer. Councillor Dyer, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Thanks for your question, Salem. I'm pleased to confirm that we are in the process of publishing my diary, which should be arranged in the coming weeks. Beyond this, conversations are ongoing about whether we could or should publish other diaries in addition to this.
Do you have a supplementary question?
I can ask the question I was going to ask, but I feel like Tony's kind of more or less answered it. The thing that I briefly mentioned is that he didn't talk about the diaries of all the committee chairs. And I'd argue there's equal kind of transparency issues there, or perhaps not equal, but kind of transparency issues there. Because if we don't know who our representatives are meeting, particularly these important positions, then how are we supposed to know whether they're acting in our best interests?
Councillor Dyer?
I think the other side of this is that previously what we have done is the Mayor published his diary and the Mayor had a team of people who were looking after his diary. As leader of the council, I have a slightly smaller team of people looking after my diary. What we have with the various chairs, so we have chairs of policy committees, we have chairs of regulatory committees, it's the level of support that would be required to ensure not only those diaries are published, but also to ensure that they are accurate. So that's what we're looking into at the present time.
Thank you very much. Let's move on to public question number 3 from Youssef Izzat on the Avon Pension Fund. And there were 3 questions for Councillor Dyer. Councillor Dyer, please.
Thank you. So the response to your first question is that the Council's ethical and equitable investment policy sets out the Council's investment principles and decisions are made in accordance with that policy. Second response to the second question is that the Council's pension fund is held with the Avon Pension Fund, and this is largely administered by Bath and North East Somerset Council, although we do have a representative on that fund. The scheme's funds are invested entirely separate from the policy that this council operates. So it has its own policy for responsible investment and is subject to a separate regulatory regime to local authority investments. They are therefore not directly governed by the policy we have in place at this council. However, the policy can be used to inform the views of the council's pension representative, who feeds into matters such as the pension fund's responsible investment policy, and that has been happening in part due to some of the previous representations from yourselves and others. We also know, if you remember from the last full council, the Avon Pension Fund has now made it clear that they are aware of these concerns, and its chair has issued a statement. There is a link to that statement in the response that's been provided to you. And in answer to your third question, as above, council decisions are made in accordance with the council's ethical and equitable investment policy. And as I say, the council's pension fund is held with the Avon Pension Fund and invested separately from this council's own policy.
Youssef, you can ask 2 supplementary questions if you wish.
Yeah, so the first one is, do you agree that the investment from arms trade companies fueling the genocide in Gaza is both a legal and moral necessity, and all the councillors today should vote for with their conscience and moral value rather than their party politics?
I'll be voting for the motion myself. I believe there is evidence that divestment does have an effect. It is, however, for each and every council to vote according to their conscience.
Second question, do you agree with me that all the councillors and political parties who vote against this motion or do unjustifiable amendments are risking and damaging their reputation and seen as a complicit violation of international law and complicit in the genocide, prioritizing their own political party benefit rather than moral values?
I don't take it upon myself to make judgments about others. I'll be voting for the motion. It is up to others to take note of what you're saying and to make their own consideration about where they feel they want to be on this debate.
Thank you, Councillor Dyer. So we'll move on to public question number 4 from Nigel Varley on heating payments, fire safety and housing issues. There were 3 questions for Councillor Parsons, please. Yes, they should be coming up on the screen. Have they not appeared yet? Thank you very much for highlighting that issue. We'll get that sorted. But just to remind everyone, the topic now is heating payments, fire safety and housing issues. Councillor Parsons.
Okay, thanks very much. And thanks very much for your questions, Nigel. Since they're not appearing on the screen, I'll give a brief summary of what each of the 3 questions was about before I launch into my answers. But so the first one was about the cladding remediation discretionary payment scheme that you mentioned earlier in your statement, and you were asking about the ways that this has been paid. It's on the screen now, which is great. So I've got some figures for you, which hopefully will be helpful. So there were 1,012 residents who received the payment, and 220 of those were in rent arrears. So they had credits applied which offset their rent arrears. So that amounted to a total of £32,904 as an offset. And then the remainder was, as you've said, paid directly to residents as a credit on their rent account. So the entire figure of £150,000 has been paid out now. And you had a question around rent arrears and where refunds might not be received in full because they're in arrears. And you mentioned some issues around some technical issues around collection of rent. I'm gonna go away and talk to the service about that because obviously those technical issues are a concern. I'm going to move on now to your second question, and this was about a fire which happened in a National Grid owned meter box. First of all, I'd just like to say that the service told me that we've received no reports of this fire. So if you're able to share details of that, I can make sure that it's investigated. Okay. Yeah, I mean, there may have been some miscommunication there, so I'll find out what's happened there.
Nigel, if you could just wait for the answers and then you can have your supplementaries. Councillor Parsons.
So regarding the issues with National Grid, there are some legal avenues that we can explore with National Grid to make sure that they meet their responsibilities. But those are complex and they might cost quite a lot of public money. But what we're going to do is we will explore the possibility of recourse for this. And we're also looking to build more constructive relationships with National Grid to make sure that their maintenance schedules are undertaken and relevant upgrades can be completed. Finally, in your third question, you asked about money that the council has spent on a range of initiatives which, since they happened under the previous administration, I don't really want to speak on behalf of them, but the point that you asked really is about investment decisions. And when it comes to our council housing, our investment is within a ring-fenced account called the Housing Revenue Account. And this is something that we've recently published our budget proposals on. So I'd invite you to have a look at those. But really, our investment in the Housing Revenue Account is really focused on our key priorities of making sure that the residents in our council homes have safe homes and can live healthy lives in those homes and in their communities.
Nigel, you've got 2 supplementary questions if you wish.
Is that on? Hello? I've got 3 questions, so it should be 3 supplementaries.
No, the rules are 3 questions,
Okay,
2
okay,
supplementaries
okay, yeah.
maximum. Those are the rules, thank you. 2 supplementary questions.
All right. Firstly, can you assure your tenants under your care that there isn't a Grenfell Tower waiting to happen in Bristol, given the danger of this national grid equipment and the fact you are reducing expenditure on fire safety, or that's what's been reported? So that's the first question. The second question is that because myself and other tenants at Gilden House are unsatisfied with the heating payments, can we buy an old boat, park it in the harbour and get the council to fork out £1.4 million to remove it? Would that be all right?
I'm not really sure I'm going to be able to answer the second question sensibly, I'm afraid, Nigel. But on the first point, we're investing an awful lot more money into the safety of our buildings. So we're investing an additional proposed £15 million in building safety in next year's budget. We are really investing very heavily in making sure that our buildings are safe, and that's across a whole range of activities, including fire safety. And we're looking to accelerate the cladding remediation programme in partnership with the regional authority and with national government as well.
Thank you very much, Councillor Parsons. Let's move on to public question 6, which is from Melissa Topping, and that's on the East Bristol Lovell neighbourhood. 2 questions for Councillor Plowden, please.
So the first question is on the screen. It's why are you claiming to have engaged with the Barton Hill Disabilities Group for EBLM when it doesn't exist? It's difficult for me to answer this question because it's from before I was the chair of the committee, and the response from officers is that in order to answer question 1, we require further detail of the specific issue being raised, as we are unsure of what you're referring to. We have engaged with various people and groups across the area with differing needs, including disabled people with a range of impairments, and we also work with the West of England's Centre for Inclusive Living to look at all transport plans at a formative stage. The second one is why are you claiming all stakeholder engagements in EBLN in support of it when there's no transparency in these engagements and stakeholders do not now support the true aspects of the scheme? And I think my answer to that has got to be that we don't claim that all stakeholder engagements in EBLN are supportive of the scheme. All engagements have been fully transparent. There's a full engagement report available on the website, and then EQIA, Equalities Impact Assessment, is also available on the website.
Melissa, do you have a supplementary?
I do, yes. Why are you insisting on continuing and forging ahead with so many people in opposition to it when you weren't in administration when all these things were supposedly done?
Melissa, first of all, I'd like to say thank you for keep coming and holding us to account, and I appreciate that you feel very personally affected by the proposals. We are proposing to continue this. It is the democratically decided decision of the City Council to do this. There's a lot of support for the scheme, and it is only a trial scheme, so we will work with stakeholders to make sure that when the trial is completed after 6 months, we can see what the best future plans will be.
Melissa, just to let you know, did you want to ask another supplementary on this issue, or do you want to save your supplementary for your other question?
Yeah, I'll save it for the other question.
Okay, so Melissa, you also had a question on complaints, and that was directed towards Councillor Dyer. There was one question on that. Councillor Dyer.
Okay, thank you. So the question is about the complaints process. The Council has operated an internal 2-stage complaints process for over 20 years. The first stage is dealt with by a person of responsibility, often a team leader or manager from the service complained about. Complaints can then be escalated to stage 2, and these are handled independently by a case manager from the corporate customer relations team. Both local government and housing ombudsman recommend this model of complaint handling, which brings over 90% of stage 1 complaints to resolution without the need for escalation. They are seen as public sector best practice and in line with other local, unitary and metropolitan authorities in England. The reason we believe this model is the right one is because services have an opportunity to resolve complaints made about them, taking ownership of criticisms and accountability for resolving them, as well as giving them the best chance to learn from complaints by implemented changes and service improvement at a service level. Also, as Stage 2 is independent services, we believe this offers citizens the objective, impartial view they sometimes require if they're unhappy with their Stage 1 response.
Melissa, your supplementary.
Yeah, well, at Stage 2, sadly, they just ask the team responsible that's caused the complaint what their answers are to it, and then they lie again. So none of these complaints are actually going to anybody that's looking into them properly.
Melissa, do you want to turn that into a question?
Sorry?
You made a statement there, but did you have another question for Councillor Dyer?
I'm happy to respond to that statement if you want.
If you can, Councillor
What do we do if
Dyer.
our complaints are going unheard and ignored?
Well, what I'll do is I'll look at with officers looking at reviewing the system so that we can trace back what happens with those complaints so we can ensure that they are being dealt with appropriately.
Thank you very much, everyone. So once again, don't worry, you will all get written responses to all of your questions. Thank you very much for coming today, but we do need to move on to get through the rest of today's business. If you wish to stay, there'll be lots more interesting reports we're going through, and we're expecting to have a break around about 3:30. But also, equally, if you want to go now, please do so quietly. Thank you very much for attending, everyone. So now, agenda item 7 is petitions notified by councillors. Thank you. There's been one councillor petition received for this meeting, and councillors are invited to speak for 1 minute. Councillor Gemfrey, would you like to present your petition?
Yeah, thank you, Lord Mayor. So the petition is the residents of Claremont Street off of Stapleton Road are calling for a parking scheme. They are just outside the current residents' parking zone. And so they have submitted a petition asking the council to create a residents' parking zone for this area. As we've heard, some of the traffic proposals and changes are not always popular. So when there is one that is popular with residents, it makes sense for us to go for it. So yes, I understand that there is a lot of money and investment required to put this scheme in, but then it does pay for itself. So I would really urge the councillors in charge of the budgets, the CEO, to look at what we can do to roll out these sorts of parking schemes as quickly as possible where residents are calling for them. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Shona, for that. So now let's move on to agenda item 8, which is the Disability Equalities Commission update. This report is for noting. I'd like to call on Alan Davis to present the report as the Commission Chair. Alan, you've got 5 minutes to present your report. Mike is coming to you now. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. May I crave your indulgence and members to remain seated, please? It's a bit easier for me. Thank you for inviting me to make my third report to you. I'd like to start by actually congratulating Chris McCaulkland at his victory at that dancing programme. I know as a blind person myself how flipping hard it is to do that kind of stuff. So as a personal thing, but also, given that also a BSL user won that competition a couple of years ago, I think it shows some very positive moves in this country's attitude to disabled people, given that millions of people had to vote for both Chris and for the previous winner. Sadly for members, though, hell is likely to freeze over before you see me on there. My only attempts at ballroom dancing 40 years ago were, thankfully, before the time of videos on YouTube, so you ain't going to see me on that programme. In terms of the Commission's work, I want to first of all thank two members that we no longer have. Anila Wood has left us to go on and do other things, and sadly, as you know, Laura Welty passed away earlier this year. After many years of contribution to the Disabled People's Movement. In terms of successes for the Commission this year, we continue to build our relationship with members. All parties were represented at a hustings, for which over 50 disabled people came along for the council elections. Councillor Dyer came to the meeting of the Commission in June shortly after being elected as leader. And we also had the Golden Motion in October on disabled people's issues, which received all party support. In terms of individual projects, we continue to work on the disabled people employment work, which is going really well for employees in the City Council. The Council now has an accessible communication policy, and the Council also has a co-production policy for us adult social care, both of which were co-produced. We continue to work with other departments. The adult social care, we work with them on the fair and affordable care policy, which was withdrawn, and now there is a group looking to see how the council can deal with that difficult conundrum of funding and issues. We continue to work with the Health Authority in terms of services for disabled people. Following the Catch a Copper programme last year, where a disabled person with a wheelchair user was badly treated by police, we have met with the Chief Constable of the police, and that may well look to a forum being set up between the police and disabled people. And finally, we have the Disabled People Strategic Transport Forum, which myself and Councillor Plowden chair. So yes, there is progress, but sadly, I can't end my report there. There are still challenges. You have heard some of those today. The Livable Neighbourhood Scheme needs more engagement with disabled people, and I will be at a meeting with Councillor Plowden in a couple of weeks' time to look at how that engagement can be improved for future schemes. Housing is still a significant issue for many disabled people. We still have a local plan which is absolutely pathetic in terms of the targets it has for wheelchair accessible and lifetime homes. We implore the City Council to move on that. And also the issue of SEND is still a major issue. Is this City Council and its education partners still committed to full inclusion and integration for all disabled people, irrespective of their impairment? We are not sure, but again, we are meeting with leaders from the education department to explore that. The statistics in terms of health and well-being are showing that all the impact over the last few years are hitting people more and more. And I would not be surprised if the Equality Impact Assessment on your budget savings show that disabled people and older people are going to suffer most. There are no easy solutions to this, we know. You have no money, the public sector has no money, the private sector has no money, the community and voluntary sector have no money. The only way we can take this forward is by making better use of the money we have. We are committed to doing that with you, but you're in a different situation now. After that Golden Motion, you will be held to account. There are targets in that Golden Motion that you have to report to in October. All the work that I've reported on, disabled people will expect to see progress. If I come here in a year's time and there's been no progress on any of those targets or any of the work, I will probably not be a happy bunny. Neither will thousands of other disabled people in the city who you've already heard from. So I ask all of you to individually and collectively commit yourself to two simple statements. Nothing about us without us. And let's make let's make Bristol a city which disabled people are proud to live. Thank you.
Thank you, Alan, for that update. So now Councillor Ed Fraser is going to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to Alan Davis for the Disability Equality Commission for this report. The impact that the Commission has continued to make over the last year should be commended, from advocating for the Council's disabled employees, challenging the Council on accessible communication, housing, health services, adult social care, and much more besides, including what you've just mentioned, Alan. You advocate for all those in the city with physical, sensory or cognitive impairments, whether they are permanent, temporary or situational, and you do so with patience and clarity, and we all benefit as a result. And as someone who experiences autism and ADHD, I'm particularly grateful. The work you do reminds me of my granddad Ben. He was a proud Geordie, a devoted husband and father, a committed member of the Labour Party, and he spent much of his career as a shop steward in a union. He was also physically disabled. He lost one of his legs in his 20s after contracting gangrene at the hospital following an accident in 1948. He committed his retirement to the Harlow Benefits Action Campaign. He supported other disabled and elderly people, helping them navigate complicated welfare paperwork and claiming benefits that they were entitled to. His work has influenced me deeply. I now run a small business supporting other neurodivergent people at work, including helping them navigate the DWP's Access to Work scheme. And I look at how Grandad Ben gave his time to advocate and support his peers with real personal pride. And I'm sure he'd be proud that organisations like the Bristol Disability Equality Commission have such visible influence in cities like ours. And I was talking to my dad about Grandad, Ben, just this morning. And sadly, he said that Ben would be horrified to know that 40 years on from his voluntary work as a benefits advisor, that a Labour government was threatening those who are most in need. We've already seen the new government sneakily change the personal independence payment renewal claim forms to make it more likely that claims will be reduced or rejected. And now Bristol Labour MP Darren Jones's colleagues in the Treasury are threatening to slash disability payments by billions of pounds nationwide. We've seen quite some grandstanding in the local press over the last week from the Labour group leader over the local budget. And if he were here, I would tell him now that we are not going to take lectures in the press from him on protecting those of the most need, when his parliamentary colleagues are trying to play off disability welfare against the financial markets. Around a quarter of the population are disabled by society in some way, yet 70% of food bank users are disabled. The cost of living for disabled people is often much higher. That's why personal independence payments exist. We're far less likely to be in well-paid work or work at all, and yet both Labour and the previous Tory government are constantly trying to clamp down on welfare spending, which damage disabled people's mental health and, crucially, do not work. I would like to have used more time in this speech to praise and respond to the Commission's work. I'm incredibly grateful for it. But this week, disabled and neurodivergent people have been used as a pawn by the Chancellor, and we cannot let that go unchecked, because cutting personal independence payments would be a shameful and unforgivable choice from this Labour government. Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the Disability Equality Commission for this report.
Thank you very much. Now, I believe Councillor Blake is going to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. Thank you, Alan. Thank you for the work of the Commission. It's really important work. It's also important that you challenge us and challenge the Green administration to do much better by way of the outcomes that we achieve over the next 4 years. We'll play our part in that, of course, and ensure that we are ambitious for the city in making this city a much more accessible place for disabled people. I don't really want to speak much about Ed's comments. I mean, I think it's really important that when these Commission reports come out that we try and be collegiate and supportive. And I think you talked about grandstanding, Ed. I think you've done a very good job at doing exactly that at this moment in time. And if the Labour government were here, they would say that actually what they're trying to do is get more disabled people back into work. And most disabled people that are claiming benefits also say they want to go back into work. So in fact, in some respects, work can be a massive enabler for disabled people, and I think that's really important. I certainly found it after having my motorcycle accident that disabled me, that work was transformational for me, actually, in becoming economically a citizen of the city again, but also getting me out of bed and actually having some motivation to go back to living a life. So I think work can be transformational. I won't say any more than that. I think it's really important that we try and be collegiate and support the work of the Commission in challenging us in constructive ambition, but also those outside of this body, other public sector bodies and the private sector to do much better, because I think I want to live in a city where disabled people are welcome and feel proud. I think, as Alan's comments. Finally, I think social progress is a journey, it's not a destination. We basically, the Commission is part of other commissions that are about making Bristol more a place for people to live and thrive in. And I think the work of this Commission is challenged us rightly, and I think we need to now step up to the mark. Thank you.
Thank you, Kelvin. And now Councillor Jos Clark to speak on behalf of the Liberal Democrat.
Thank you. Before I start what I was going to say, I'm a bit surprised at your speech there, because actually what we're doing is we're responding to the good work of a commission, a body of volunteers who worked tirelessly over the years in this city to raise the issues of people with disabilities. And I was a bit surprised to hear what you've just said, and I'm slightly saddened. I think Councillor Blake feels sort of similar to me, and I just think it's important because this is not a political debate. They're presenting a report, and that's what we should be commending. So that's what I'm going to do. So, Alan, thank you very much for your report today, and thank you very much for the clarity of your report. It is clear from this year's report that and in previous years that it's definitely work in progress. And I commend you and your committee for keeping at that task tirelessly. On point 2 in the report today, I note that the committee is looking for new members, and I see that this is although sad in some respects, it's a real opportunity to inject new life, new energy, and new sort of a new perspective to your committee. Running through the report is a sense that the partnership working between yourselves and the council is generally positive, and that you have good channels of communication with the various departments. I wish you and your committee well for the next year's working, and would like to thank you for your tireless work as an expert in this field, and look forward to continuing to work with you and the committee in the coming year. Thank you very much indeed. Thank you.
Thank you, Joss. And now Councillor Richard Eddy to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. Richard.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Firstly, may I thank Alan Davis and his fellow commissioners for their laser-like focus they kept on disabled rights and the hard work which is really key for the city and this council. As various members know, I serve on the committee model work review group. Its predecessor at the working group last year and before, actually, there were various concerns raised about mayoral commissions such as this one, not being picked up and followed by the new administration on whatever took its place. Frankly, I didn't share those concerns. I had complete confidence the case was well made, and this administration, as I expected, would actually take the concerns of the Commission seriously, so well done. Alan brought a report, or rather it was officers' report, but he spoke to it to the HR committee last year. In that report, it was noted significant, considerable progress had been done in Bristol City Council, but there was still a significant amount still to do, particularly with changing attitudes. I just want to briefly focus on not attitudes, but physical works, and the importance that we actually consider disabled rights. And with respect, Ed, this is very much focused on your brief, of course. Members may be aware there are considerable roadworks and pavement changes affecting Upper Morden Street by the BRI. I've written to officers about this and they are responding. I particularly want to focus on one personal experience. My 87-year-old mother is presently awaiting a spinal operation. This has been largely housebound over the last year. In fact, since May, she's only been able to mobilise by using a four-wheeled walker like I use. Now, I had to take her to outpatients appointments in December at the BRI. 100% of the places where outpatients previously alighted, you couldn't access. There were fences, there were bollards, there were physical obstacles to stop them needing disabled patients from actually doing. In a way, it's quite funny in a way, because can you picture it for a moment? I stopped the car and I saw a few yards where there actually was a disabled, a not active bus stop. So I stopped there for a time. So I got out, got my walker from the rear passenger seat, went round to the boot, got her walker out, took it round with my walker to her passenger door, helped her out, and then got her onto the pavement where she had to make her own way in while I went to park the car somewhere secure. If that person was not capable, they had dementia or even more severe disability, there is no way they could actually do that.
Councillor Eddie, you're way over. Way over.
Could I make a plea, Ed? We do need to look at this, and things like the East Bristol Livability Scheme, it needs to actually accommodate disabled rights, please.
Thank you very much, Councillor Eddie. Thank you, everyone, and that concludes agenda item 8. So now agenda item 9 is care experience as a protected characteristics. I'd like to call upon Councillor Christine Townsend to move the report as chair of the Children and Young People Policy Committee. Councillor Townsend, please.
So, thank you, Lord Mayor. So, as the Executive Member for Children and Children's Services and Education, I stand to introduce this report on behalf of all of us. Every member in this chamber is part of the corporate parenting, and every officer that's employed by this council is part of the corporate parent. It is a unique role. It doesn't exist anywhere else. And I just want to make that really, really clear. We've heard from some care experienced young people at the beginning of Public Forum where they spoke about the discrimination that they have experienced, the stigma that they've experienced. There was one example from a healthcare setting, and the poor life outcomes for those that are care experienced have been known in this country for decades, and one can only wonder why it is that it takes so long for that group of people to be recognised within our society. Together we are the corporate parent. Those unique responsibilities that we hold enable us now, when this passes, as a council, to make sure that the care experienced communities are considered. There are various examples within the paper. I won't read those out. I would hope that people within this chamber have read them. It's a locally protected characteristic that is different to a protected characteristic under the Equalities Act. Hopefully, this new Labour government will get us to a point where they will review the Equalities Act and they will begin to include those other groups within our community that we also know face huge barriers as they try to make their way into and through their adulthood. It's for all of us to be tracking this. It's for all of us to be monitoring it, because we are all members of the corporate parent. Whatever committee you sit in, whatever boards you might speak at, whoever it is that's coming to you that wants to talk to you about a planning application, for example, I want everybody here to be talking about, what are you doing for the care experience community? Tell me about that particular group, because it's not going to be on their radar, not at this moment, because it isn't in that national legislation. As the chair of the Corporate Parenting Board, it will be me and the board, those of us that are on the board, to keep a tabs on what we're doing internally. But only you, as the corporate parenting, and our officers, as members of the corporate parent, can make sure that it becomes an embedded element within our practice. It's part of the McAllister review that was published by the Department of Education in 2022. The DFE at the time described it as the biggest review of children's social care. There are huge numbers of recommendations within there, and there's a 9-year period of implementation. So I think that this will come back, it will come back, and it will come back, and we will see the improvements in the children's social care system, because we really, really need it. Our children and our young people are the most important element of our residents within this city, and they are our futures, and they are also the future of this city and this country. I look forward to seeing the new Labour government make sure that they're implemented. Many of them can be done and have been done at the local level, and we will continue to push for that. But there are also things at the national level that we will not be able to do unless the national government gets behind it. So please pass vote for this paper, and I congratulate our young people who are care experienced that came to share with us some of their experiences and the reason why this is so important. Thank you.
Councillor Townsend, did you want to show councillors a film at this point?
Lord Mayor, maybe Councillor Cornsham would like to do her. And then I'll happily introduce the film, absolutely, but we'd be breaking something up, I think, if we did that
all right.
now.
Just wondering, we hadn't forgotten that bit. Okay, thank you very much. So in that case, let's move on to Councillor Kaja-Hornchin to second report as the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and I thank all those young people who came to talk to us today, and I do second this motion. Just imagine you're having a hard time emotionally when you're 16, and the consequence, you do not complete your A-levels. A few years later, you're ready to resume, only now there's no funding for you, or not even a secure place for you to live in to do this. I'm sure there are many of us in this chamber that have gone back to their studies and studied later in life. Imagine that you finally got that interview. It's a 2-hour assessment and it's online. If your Wi-Fi is good enough and that new tenant in your HMO would turn his loud music on in the middle of your interview. Pathways to adulthood are difficult this third decade of the 21st century. Independent living, becoming your own person, being meaningfully employed in a stable job that you can excel in, one that actually provides you an income, is becoming ever harder. There's a decline in the youth market as recent statistics show that statistics show that 13.9% of all 16 to 24-year-olds are unemployed. For the care leavers, that number is closer to 38%. A long and protracted recruitment process that we have evolved recently takes months and months in which you're not paid, months in which you do not know the outcome. More importantly, a shortage of affordable housing means young people are having to live longer in unstable rented HMOs or now the trendy co-living with no security of tenure. Who are you going to be sharing your bathroom with next month? Now add this adverse effects of having childhood trauma. We know that childhood trauma leads to poorer mental and physical outcomes. Now, add to the, and let's not mince words. Children come into the care system because something severely went wrong, something they had no control over. Most have come from abusive and neglectful environments. Many would not have had the experience of a wider family network, aunties, uncles, grandparents, helping out. This disadvantage is long-standing. It affects their emotional and physical health. It can affect their relationships. It definitely affects their trust in people. Then there is the discrimination that is direct, as our young people have so clearly told us today, and quite disappointingly. And often, there can be a well-meaning but indirect discrimination. Too often I've witnessed teachers and youth workers or social workers have a low expectation of children in care. Why do we think protected characteristics might help with this? Firstly, there's the legal recourse if faced with discrimination. It can raise awareness, and that means that care experience and can challenge stereotypes. It would help employers and other institutions to make reasonable adjustments. Something I have witnessed with other protected characteristics has definitely worked. Let us build a better and fairer society where the circumstances of your childhood would not affect you lifelong. Thank you.
Thank you very much. So, Councillor Townsend, if you'd like to very briefly introduce the film, please.
Very briefly, yeah. So this is a film where over 100 councils collaborated to make this. It's very short. It's directly about part of the McAllister Review that said we need a national campaign to try to recruit more foster carers. we know that if children need to go into care, the best care for them is a family setting within a foster family, not out a long way from their communities in children's home. We know that doesn't give us the best outcomes. The best outcomes are in families with foster carers. So this is a recruitment video that's being used at the national level. And the reason that we're watching a film is because we are all members of the corporate parent. This isn't the green light for anyone and everybody to bring films to full council. The reason that this is coming is because we are all part of that corporate parent.
I'm so glad you made that point. Thank you. Okay,
Rob, I think it's on.
Mike, I just wanted to wish you a very, very happy birthday. So gutted I can't be there in person, but I hope you have a wonderful day. We all do.
Mike, we can't believe you're turning the big 6-0. You don't look a day over 59.
Zara! Surprise! We proper fooled you.
You sure did.
Happy birthday, Dad.
Where are you? Hope you got plenty of veggie burgers today.
Don't worry, mate, we're on it, barbecue.
You know, it's hard to put things into words, but I'll try.
Pop out some dinner when you're ready.
When I first came to stay with you, I was so nervous.
We get plenty of sparrow, and maybe if we're lucky, a goldfinch.
Can we go in now? I've had enough.
Ketchup?
Put it on the bun and not the burger. That's how my dad used to do it, it's way better.
Then email her.
But I have such great memories of that time,
Hey, you're a natural.
You're not a bad tea trader.
and I hope you do too.
Hey, you have got to see this. I found it in the loft.
I think it's on.
Watch this, mate. I forgot we even filmed it.
Here we are, looking for exotic animals. Oh, up there. Look at it! Something. Oh my god!
Yeah, nice straight peg.
Don't get it. What I'm meant to do is stupid. It's okay. I'm starting to get the hang of this. Totally, I don't get it. It's just stupid.
Well done.
Thanks.
I guess what I'm trying to say is I don't really know what would have happened to me without you.
It's hard to put things into words, but I'll try. Everything I've got, everything I have now, I look back and, well, for everything, thank you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, everyone. Thank you. That's the second time I've seen that film, and I saw it at the launch a couple of months ago, and it's equally powerful and moving. So I think we'll go straight to the vote, if that's okay. So the recommendation is shown on the screen and is on the report in your agenda pack. It's going to be an aye-nay vote. So all those in favour of the recommendation, please say aye. Aye. All against say nay. The recommendation is approved. Thank you. Well done. So agenda item 10, the council tax base 2025 to 26, and agenda item 11, collection fund surplus deficit 2024 and 2025. With the agreement of the party group leaders, items 10, 11 will be taken together with one round of speakers. Please note, however, that each item will have a separate e-vote at the end. So first, I'd like to call on Councillor Tony Dyer to move the report as chair of the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee. Councillor Dyer.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, to move the first report, which is the council tax base, the motion is to ask council to agree the amount calculated by Bristol City Council as its council tax base for the financial year of 2025-2026, and that shall be 136,010. For the second vote, we're looking at the collection fund surplus deficit for 2024-2025, and the recommendation for council is to approve an estimated surplus as at 31st of March 2025 on the council tax element of the collection fund of 3.586 million be declared for 2024-2025, and secondly, that an estimated surplus as at 31st of March 2025 on the non-domestic weights element of the collection fund, net of grants, so it'll be 1.606 million to be declared for 2024-2025. Lord Mayor, I'm sure that the other speakers will talk in more detail about the report itself. I want to talk about the more overarching importance of what may be mistaken for being quite a dry paper. Lord Mayor, we have recently had the local government financial settlement. That local government financial settlement gives local authorities an indication of the amount of funding they are going to get forward for the next budget year. In Bristol's case, when you look at the government's calculations, the government tends to use a calculation called core spending power, and the local government financial settlement has given an increase in core spending power for Bristol City Council of 7.7%. When you account for likely inflation, that is more like 5.2%. In monetary terms, it's £39.5 million extra. But of that £39.5 million, 45% will come from council tax paid locally by Bristolian in the city. In fact, this continues the situation where we have increasingly become reliant on council tax paid locally. So the core spending power for the city as a whole is 552 million, or just under. Of that, 55% or 300 million will come from council tax paid in the city. And that is why it is important that we ensure we have an accurate council tax surplus deficit and that we have an accurate estimate of the number of equivalent Band D properties. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you, Tony. So now I'd like to ask Councillor Caroline Gooch to second reports as the Vice Chair.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I second the new council tax base recommendation of 136,010 Band D equivalents, and I also recommend the collection fund surplus deficit report. It's good to see an in-year surplus for both the council tax and business rates. The second home premium, also bringing in an equivalent of 1,343 Band D properties, is a welcome boost. The council tax surplus has been affected by several things. Bristol continues to have a generous council tax reduction scheme, but this is reducing over time as the number of working age claimants is reducing. We've had a £3 million reduction in liability due to delays in dwelling completions. Planning applications have increased year on year, but the number of completed dwellings annually has fallen since the 2021-22 year. Obviously, many factors affect building completion, such as availability of building materials and workforce, but the more that we can do as a council to hasten the planning process, the better. There has been a £3.1 million increase in council tax exemptions, including a £2.6 million increase in student exemptions. As a diverse and growing student city, we have increasing numbers of student-only accommodations. University cities are overburdened with student exemptions compared with non-university towns and rural areas, and governments should really implement a subsidy scheme for local authorities with high student populations to account for this. However, these increased pressures on council tax have been partially mitigated by a £4 million reduction in the allowance for impairments of debts. Collection of arrears on non-domestic rates have also surpassed expectations to the tune of £3.1 million. This means we're better at collecting arrears and not writing off as much as we have done previously, and we commend the council officers on this achievement. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now Councillor Malik to speak on behalf of the Green Group.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. So I'm rising to talk to the report, the two reports, council tax base for 25-26 and the collection fund surplus deficit report for 24-25. Both reports demonstrate the importance of responsible financial management, particularly in these challenging times, while also providing opportunities to reflect our shared values as a council. The council tax base report highlights steady growth with an increase to 136,010 Band D equivalent properties. This reflects not only the expansion of our city, but also the need for fair contributions from all who benefit from local services. As a Green councillor, I see this as an opportunity to ensure that every pound raised is invested in making Bristol a fairer, greener and more healthier city, whether that's through tackling air pollution, improving public spaces or supporting our most vulnerable residents. The Collection Fund Surplus Deficit Report forecasts a 5.192 million surplus for 24-25. This is a testament to effective measures like the review of single persons discounts and improved arrears collections. However, it's also a reminder of the inequalities we must address, ensuring that resources are directed where they are needed most, particularly as residents face the pressures of the cost of living crisis. The funding that we do have must be used to build a city that works for everyone by tackling inequality and investing in the sustainable infrastructure that will serve Bristol for generations to come. Every member here will be aware of the failings of the current system of council tax. It is a regressive tax, an outdated tax, and an ineffective tax. We are all aware of the funding crisis that the council, like so many others, are faced with alongside government austerity that continues to this day. And the legacy of severe mismanagement of the council's finances in the past, a key reason for it is the council tax simply cannot raise enough money to properly fund a large and diverse local authority such as Bristol. It was disappointing, therefore, that the Labour government ruled out reforms to council tax, instead opting to continue forcing local authorities to rely on this unfair and inefficient levy. I commend the leader for presenting this report, which reflects the council's commitment to strong financial planning and to progressive vision for Bristol's future. I urge members to support the reports. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Tom Blenkinsop to speak on behalf of the Labour Group, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'll avoid repeating verbatim what's been laid out in the agenda, and I think I'll be touching on similar topics to other speakers. As much as I would stand proudly alongside certain Labour colleagues in insisting that tax and procurement are fascinating things we should be excited about, I suspect that's not a universal sentiment, so I'll just highlight a few key topics. The additional tax on second homes is a good start. Bristol's housing crisis is particularly acute, as I'm sure we're all aware, the more so depending on the state of our council housing stock and going forwards. But if this policy achieves the desired effect, which is to reduce the number of second homes, we will be out of the new funds, obviously enough. So we may want to avoid getting too attached to the increase and look to ensure that we achieve a growth in our tax base and finances more broadly by more sustainable methods. The Council is rightly cautious about investment and finance, opting for security in its arrangements, but I want to caution us against inaction and assuming that things will just tick along nicely. I think we do need to be proactive in our approach to finances. Likewise with student housing, we do need more and more of it every year. But speaking from a very cold and clinical point of view, every student household we have is one that isn't paying tax. Economically speaking, for the city as a whole, we benefit from having a large student population. It's good that we're a university city, but it may be advisable to ask ourselves how much student housing is too much, and if we would be better served by building denser, more specialised student housing, though I grant this is not always popular. Lastly, I wanted to touch on the council tax reduction scheme. While we continue to see a slow decline in usage, probably a sign of economic recovery post-COVID, it's clear that many households, we still have 21,800 of working age, still need ongoing support. And I need to be absolutely clear, that number is not going to magically have the money available should we decide the scheme needs to be revisited or means tested. If the administration wants to boost council tax receipts, they will need slightly more suitable methods than trying to squeeze the most vulnerable. I agree with Councillor Malik that we should be aiming to be a city that is egalitarian, a city that is fair and supports social justice, not acting against it. It's clear that the Council, in order to deal with the financial challenges that linger, unsurprisingly after 14 years of neglect and financial throttling locally and nationally, we need to grow our tax base. Some of that will undoubtedly arise from council tax increases, one of the great certainties in life. But I feel we will need to be more cunning and more creative with our finances. We need to grow Bristol quicker than we grow its bills, find better ways to collect tax and sort out arrears, which I'm sure will be popular, or find other methods of financial gain for incentives or penalties like the second homes. We need to be cautious in our approach, but we also need to be, as I say, cunning. We need to find solutions and work together on doing so. But I thoroughly support both recommendations and urge others to do likewise.
Thank you, Tom. And finally, Councillor Hucker to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group. Jonathan.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. The reports relating to the council tax base for 2025-26 and the collection fund for 2024-25 were approved unanimously by the Strategy and Resources Policy Committee last month, and I see no reason to depart from that recommendation. I would like to acknowledge the expertise of the officers in preparing these reports. The collection fund report in particular contains many estimates and assumptions. There are many components to this report with offsetting items, but I will confine my comments to a number of key highlights. It is to be welcome that the Council's share of the surplus is 3.6 million, although most of this relates to the balance brought forward from the previous year. Although there has been a shortfall in the in-year council tax income, there has been a significant improvement in arrears collection, resulting in a reduction in the allowance for impairment of debts of 4 million. However, this is more than offset by an assumed level of growth in the housing market that has not materialised, and an increase in the cost of student exemptions amounting to 2.6 million. A review of single-person discounts is likely to generate additional income of 1 million. There is an estimated surplus on the business rates element of the collection fund, which is a turnaround from the previous year. As with council tax, there continues to be a significant improvement in business rates arrears collection. However, the factor which accounts for the biggest element of the turnaround is a large reduction in the business rates appeals provision. This appears to be a highly subjective figure, but it does seem that officers have adopted a prudent approach in calculating it. As far as the council tax base is concerned, Bristol City Council is an outlier of the core cities by offering the most generous council tax reduction scheme. This needs reform, and I hope members will grasp the nettle on this. Bristol has a very large student population and an increasing number of student exemptions. This obviously provides a very significant financial challenge for the council. However, the large student population does bring benefits to the city's hospitality sector and nighttime economy. That view is based on my own observations from many evenings spent in Wetherspoons. You are, Stephen. You're not the only one. I commend the reports to the House for approval.
Thank you very much. So we'll now move to the vote on item 10, the council tax base and e-vote. Please ensure you're in your allocated seats so your vote is recorded accurately. So you're voting on the recommendation and the vote will be 15 seconds. Please vote now.
Oh, obviously your button isn't harder than my button.
You've got a microphone on there. Oh yeah, microphone's on.
That vote was carried unanimously. So if we go on then to item 11.
Lord Mayor, sorry. Can I just check that Councillor Blake's vote was registered, because he seems to be having a problem with his system. Can I check? Is it on there?
No, so add you. Thank you. Thank you very much, Calvin. Delighted to hear that. Thank you very much, Calvin. So if everyone's okay, we'll go on then to the vote for item 11, the collection fund. This is also an e-vote. Once again, ensure you're in your allocated seats and you're voting on the recommendation, and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. Kelvin, were you also voting for that one? Yeah, that's unanimous. Great. Well done, everyone. So the recommendation is approved. So now it's time for a break. 20-minute adjournment, as agreed earlier. So it's 2:45 by that clock. So let's be back ready to go at 4:05, please. Meeting. Thank you very much. Very elegant, Heather. My days of doing that are long gone. Okay, members. So first, I'm going to ask if we can have an extension so that we can hear both the golden motion and the silver motion today. So because of the number of speeches involved, that means we're probably going to need an extension that will take us up to 5:15. Is everyone okay to continue until 5:15? Okay, that's great news. But if I could ask everyone to be really tight with their speeches as well, just so we can get it done as quickly as possible, that would be wonderful. Okay, so let's move on. Welcome back, everybody. It's now agenda item 12, the golden motion, ceasefire in Gaza and end in the UK's arms trade with Israel. The motion will be shown in the room during the proposing speech. And first, I'd like to ask Councillor Shona Jemfrey of the Green Party to move the motion. Shona.
Thank you, Lord Mayor, and thank you to the protesters who have so diligently and passionately promoted this cause. Thank you for sticking around today to see it as well. I'm sure we've all seen the headlines that Israel and Hamas are currently negotiating ceasefire. Obviously, this is hugely welcome if it happens, but we have to be careful not to get complacent. There have been temporary ceasefires before. We need to keep the pressure up for a permanent ceasefire. The official Palestinian death toll stands over 47,000 people. This is the equivalent of the centre of Bristol being wiped completely off the map with all residents killed. Of that, over 17,000 are children. And the situation may be even worse than that. As we heard earlier, a UK-led study has recently found that the death toll could be up to 41% worse, and the majority of verified victims are women and children. Israel is not allowing international journalists from media organisations independent access to Gaza. Now, I just want to share the words of Dr. Nizam Mahmoud, a retired British surgeon who testified to the House of Commons about his experiences volunteering in Gaza. He saw a number of children with sniper injuries to the head, a single shot to the head, no other injuries. So clearly, they were deliberately targeted by Israeli snipers. That was day after day. He also reported that after airstrikes, the drones would come down and pick off civilians, children. We were operating on children who would say, I was lying on the ground after a bomb had dropped and this quadcopter came down and hovered over me and shot me. The surgeon explained that the bullets fired by the drones were small cuboid pellets and that he fished a number of those out of the abdomen of small children. I think the youngest I operated on was a 3-year-old. He described those pellets as way more destructive than conventional bullets, as he found that they would go in and they would bounce around, so they would cause multiple injuries. One 7-year-old boy he operated on had an injury to his liver, spleen, bile, arteries, so quite extensive destruction from a single entry point. The surgeon has a long experience of working in a number of conflict zones all over the world, including Rwanda. He said, I've never seen anything on this scale ever. I've never been in a conflict area where medical aid has been restricted to that extent. It's not allowing supplies in, bombing healthcare facilities, attacking ambulances, killing healthcare workers. If all of that didn't happen, then tens of thousands of lives would be saved. It doesn't matter who you are in Gaza. If you're a Palestinian, you're a target. He said that what is happening in Gaza cannot be anything other than collective punishment, a consistent attempt to essentially wipe out a large part of the population. Another surgeon who volunteered there, an American called Mark Perlmutter, commented, the Western world is paying for the bombs that are burning children to death. They're paying for the bullets that shredded those children. We are complicit in this. Fellow councillors, it's easy when we hear these stories and see the awful images on the news to feel helpless and not know what to do. But here is something today that we can do. We can give our pension fund representative a show of support and state very clearly that divestment is something Bristol wants to do. We can ask officers to look at any legal options we've got to removing the complicit companies from our procurement contracts. We do know that this is something our residents want. We know that staying silent is not an option. We know that by passing this motion, we join our voices to other councils who are doing the same. We can see that
Shona, if you can wrap it up, please.
International pressure may be starting to work. I urge you all to vote for this motion. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. Thank you, Shona. Okay, thank you. So now, Councillor Malik to second the motion. Sorry, I realised that wasn't recorded. So Councillor Mallet to second the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Lord Mayor, fellow councillors and members of the public, I stand here today to second the motion that's been eloquently and emotionally expressed by my colleague, Shona Jeffries. The scale of suffering in Gaza is beyond comprehension. Tens of thousands of lives lost, nearly half of them children, over 90% of Palestinians displaced. Entire families have been wiped out. This is not just a tragedy, it's a humanitarian catastrophe that demands our action. Behind these statistics are real people, children who will never grow up, parents grieving for their loved ones, communities erased. The International Court of Justice has ruled there is plausible evidence of genocidal acts, and as a state party to the Genocidal Convention, the UK is obliged to act. We cannot turn a blind eye. We cannot be complicit. As councillors, we may not control foreign policy, but we have the power to ensure that Bristol does not profit from the suffering. By divesting from companies complicit in the destruction, we send a message. Our city stands for justice. It stands for peace and for the sanctity of all human life. This motion is not about politics or faith. It's about humanity. It's about standing up for the universal values of compassion and justice. Today, we have a chance to say to the people of Gaza, we see you, we hear you, and we will not remain silent. I urge every councillor here to support this motion, not just as a gesture of solidarity, but as a commitment to act. Let us be the voice for those who have been silenced, and let us stand on the right side of history. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Maddock. Now, there's been an amendment from the Liberal Democrat group which has been published online as a supplement. I'd like to ask Councillor Stephen Williams of the Liberal Democrats to move the amendment, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As Shona said when she introduced her motion, there is grounds for hope today by events taking place in Gaza. But we've been here before. Let's hope these talks succeed. I also hope that we'll be able to have a motion between most of the parties in this chamber that would unite us rather than divide us on an issue we really shouldn't be divided on, and would bring Bristolians together. And I hope this amendment, from the discussions that have been taking place, achieves that objective. Our objective should be to bring Bristolians together, particularly at a time when incidences of anti-Semitic attacks and Islamophobic attacks are on the rise. But we do need to have some balance in our discussions. We were all horrified, I'm sure, by the events on the 7th of October 2023, when in an attack by Hamas on Israeli settlements, 796 civilians were murdered, 270 of whom were at a musical festival. 247 people were taken hostage, many of whom are still in captivity after 14 months, and there was use of rape and sexual assault as a weapon against women. Israel had a right to defend itself at that point, and in particular to seek to rescue its hostages. But Netanyahu undoubtedly saw an opportunity. And what we've seen since is totally unacceptable. The unrelenting bombardment, the blocking of the essential supplies of food and medical supplies into the territory, and the obstruction of the work of the United Nations agencies in the region is, as Abdul said, a humanitarian catastrophe. Netanyahu has been indicted by The Hague, and in my opinion, he is a war criminal, just like Vladimir Putin. Now, I've been 3 times to the occupied territories, including to Gaza, in the aftermath of the last Israeli assault operation Kass-led. I've seen the bombed-out buildings, I've met distressed families, and I know exactly what was taking place at that time. What we've seen on our screens since is far, far worse. But I've also met the fathers of Israeli children who were blown up while their children were attending a birthday party. Tragedy has been taking place in this region for a long time, and it's important we recognise that. I've been in a bomb shelter with Israeli children. These are seared on my memory, but they are daily acts of a terrifying existence for people on both sides of that border. So what can we do? Now, the United Kingdom is not a major player in this region. The United States is, they won't act. The European Union could use its trade links. It never has chosen to do so. So what we can do is limited, and what we can do as a city is even more limited. But it is important we use our words and signals today. It is right that we call for a bilateral ceasefire and the return of all hostages. It's right that we call for an ethical investment policy to be adopted by our pension fund, in particular for people who are trading in armaments or are on the UN list of people who are operating in illegally occupied
Councillor Williams, if you could wrap it up, please.
Lord Mayor, it's hard to do justice in a series of 3-minute speeches to a 7 decades-long conflict, but words do matter, and I hope that the words of all of us say today do make a difference. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Councillor Williams. Thank you. Can I just remind members of the public, there is no participation in this point of the proceedings. We must listen respectfully to the different councillors and the different viewpoints, and then we'll be having a vote later. But I understand passions are high, but you know, if you keep interrupting, we'll have to adjourn the meeting. So please try to control your passions as much as you can. I know it's really difficult, but please do so. Okay, so let's now go on to Councillor Classic of Liberal Democrats to second the amendment.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I rise to second the amendment, but I'll be reserving my remarks from this time.
Thank you very much. So now we're here from speakers on the amendment. And first I'd like to call upon Councillor Izzy Russell to speak on behalf of the Green Group. And just to say to everyone, this is Izzy's maiden speech. So good luck, Izzy.
Hello. It's been an emotional full council. I've personally cried, I think, 3 times. So I'll keep it short. This is an important motion for Bristol, for our international community, and for our climate, and it sets a precedent globally. I can see lots of support and empathy in the room, both from colleagues and from residents. This makes me proud to live in Bristol, and today I am proud of Bristol City Council. I'd like to thank the Lib Dems for their amendment, and thank you to Labour for their collaboration. I hope that the National Labour Party will be as understanding and empathetic going forwards. I'd just like to ask everybody to vote with their conscience, vote to make history and be on the right side of history. Vote for this motion. Thank you.
Well done, Izzy. Thank you. Thank you. And we now have another maiden speech from Councillor El Maghrabi, who's speaking on behalf of the Labour Group.
Okay. Thank you, Lord Mayor. I want to start by thanking the petitioners for bringing this motion forward and for highlighting the importance of ethical investments. The situation in Gaza is a humanitarian catastrophe. Thousands of civilians have been killed, and nearly 2 million people have been displaced, and entire communities have been decimated. The International Court of Justice has highlighted serious breaches of international law, including actions tantamount to apartheid, and has reaffirmed that all states have an obligation to prevent and deter further atrocities. As someone of Palestinian heritage, this issue resonates deeply with me. It's not just a distant geopolitical crisis, it's a deeply personal one. My identity is rooted in a history of displacement and a long struggle of self-determination justice and dignity. Watching the devastation unfold in Gaza is a daily reminder of the urgency of action. We must unequivocally condemn Hamas's violent attacks and the targeting of civilians, and we must also speak with clarity and honesty about the atrocities committed by the Israeli armed forces. The ongoing bombardment of Gaza, the countless needless deaths of civilians, and the blockade of food and aid that has caused unimaginable suffering are breaches of international law. These actions, alongside the broader military occupation and settler violence in the West Bank, continue to deprive Palestinians of their basic rights and humanity. This motion is more than a rhetoric. It's about responsibility. The Avon Pension Fund currently holds over £10 million in investments in arms companies, many of which supply weapons that perpetuate conflicts in Palestine and elsewhere. By letting Avon Pension Fund know that we want to divest from these companies, we send a clear message that these pensions could be so much better invested elsewhere, ethical investments that benefit Bristolians. The amendment broadens the scope instead of just focusing on Israel. It focuses on all arms companies. For example, pensions funding arms used by the Saudis in Yemen deserves the fund's attention too. This also removes a section on procurement which is unlawful. The council cannot legally discriminate against any company based in a country the UK has a trade agreement with. Like if we left this in, we would get campaigners that hoped up over something we cannot do. The main ask of the motion was that we can legally do is call for the divestment of the pension fund from arms and call for a ceasefire. This amended motion will do just that too. News today is that a ceasefire is close. Now we need diplomacy that addresses the root causes of the conflict, ending the siege in Gaza, halting illegal settlements, and pursuing a path to a two-state solution. Let us also be clear that a future of peace and security for the Israelis is intrinsically tied to justice and freedom for Palestinians Palestinians. There is no pathway to peace that does not uphold the rights, safety, and dignity of all people in the region. So I urge everyone votes for this amendment. Thank you.
Well done, Al. Okay, let's hear now from Councillor Mark Weston, who speaks on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you very much, my Lord Mayor, and congratulations on both maiden speeches. Very well done to both of you. Right, this is a complicated issue. I think when it comes to the Middle East, sorry, I'm fuzzing myself. When it comes to the Middle East, things are geopolitically complicated and some things are very simple. I think all of us are after a ceasefire. Every single person in this room, and I doubt I'm the only councillor who, as well as reading the documents, has been checking the BBC News app all the way through this, looking for updates. And fingers crossed, but we've been here before, we've walked down that aisle, but it does seem hopeful, so let's hope that it is true. For myself, and we have a free vote in the Conservative Group on this one, it's now a matter of conscience. For myself, the motion as originally tabled was incomplete. I didn't believe it had the balance that it needs on this kind of complicated issue. The amendment, original Lib Dem amendment, which we saw, I favoured and would have supported. The amendment before you today, that's now been pushed, I'm going to abstain on. I don't believe it has the right level of balance. My real problem when it came to the original motion, I'm going to try and do both speeches in one go, because I know you love hearing me, but let's try and go for some brevity on it. As it was drafted, it didn't mention Hamas once in the entire motion. It also barely mentioned hostages. It's a 47-line motion. It mentions them on line 35. As has been mentioned before, on the 7th of October, what has escalated the bloodshed, I'll say escalated, not stopped, because we know actually bloodshed is happening in the Middle East all the time. Escalated the bloodshed was Hamas's attack on Israel. 1,200 people dead. The youngest was 9 months. So bloodshed has happened on both sides, but that wasn't mentioned, and I think it needed to be. What also was barely mentioned, as I say, was the hostages. 251 of them were taken on that day, and at the moment, 94 of them are still held. We suspect, or the estimate is, that about 30 of them are dead, but the bodies are still there. The reality is, all of those, Israel did kill somebody. Israel did.
Shh, let's hear the debate, please.
The reality is, any ceasefire we want, anytime we talk about this, has to have the return of those hostages, because we really want all of us to see the bombs stop falling. Because what we have at the moment, there's been so much blood on both sides, and my fear, my real worry, is that we'll never break the cycle of bloodshed at all. I mean, I commend the Egyptian and Qatari mediators that are trying to pull this together. I think we probably all do. Because to try and thread this needle must be an intense set of negotiations. So although the amendment is better on the motion, I still don't think it puts that level of balance in. I do commend your efforts to try and do it, but we can't forget where this originally began, and I say the latest escalation, and we can't forget the plight of the hostages still held. But I certainly would echo the comments and support the idea of a ceasefire in the Middle East. We do need the blood to stop. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Councillor Weston. Councillor Williams, would you like to respond as move of the amendment?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. As we've all seen by the emotional response to Councillor Mughrabi's speech, this has been a profound moment for all of us, I think, in this chamber, and I welled up quite a bit while listening to you. And as Izzy said, this is a matter of conscience for all of us. It's a matter of conscience that is informed by what we've read, what we've seen on a nightly basis on television. And there's always a danger in this. You get inured to it because it goes on and on and on, this conflict. And Al mentioned what's going on in Yemen as well, which doesn't get the attention that this conflict should have. there's always a danger that we feel powerless as elected representatives on occasions like this. And in terms of pulling the levers, we are powerless. But like I said earlier, our words matter. We've heard some very powerful and sincere words today. And I think it's shown this council at its best. We've put together a compromise amendment, and I'd like to thank councillors from the Green Party and their staff, councillors from the Labour Party and their staff, who've worked together with us through the course of today, including during the meeting, to get to a final form of words. And I hope we've got to something where the majority of councillors in this room can agree that we do make a clear statement on what we think about this situation, but we also give a fairly clear mandate to our representatives on the Avon Pension Fund as well, that they should seek to influence their fellow trustees from the other authorities in Avon to come up with an ethical investment policy on a broad front, in fact, but specifically on this case, to divest from the shares in companies that are on the UN list of being complicit in acts in the Middle East. So I hope most councillors in this chamber will vote for the amendment that we've put forward with very good intentions and brings us together as a chamber, but more importantly, actually brings our city together as well. We do not want dividing lines in our city. We have a small Jewish community, we have a larger Muslim community, but all of us, whatever our background, are concerned by this, and actually we are much more united than where we started off, maybe 48 hours ago. So I hope everyone votes for the amendment. Thank you, Lord Mayor.
Thank you very much. Councillor Gemfrey, would you like to respond as move of the original motion?
Thank you, Lord Mayor. I'm aware of time and that we've all been here a long time already. Yes, I just want to thank everyone for their positive comments. Yes, in terms of balance, I think all I will say is I think it's important to look at the death tolls since 2023 and to look at which side has the funds and the arms that are coming from UK arms factories. That's what we're here looking at today. Thank you very much, particularly to my councillor, my colleague on the Labour bench, for speaking so passionately and well about this. I really appreciate it. Yeah, I would encourage everyone to vote for this amendment, which has been worked very hard on, to find wording that we can agree on, we can get passed as a council, so that our representative on the Avon Pension Fund can then take the will of the council to the Avon Pension Fund, and that is the goal of today. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Shona. So we will now move to the vote. This will be an e-vote. Please ensure you're in your allocated seats so your vote is recorded accurately. And remember, you're voting on the amendment and the vote will be open for... Please vote now. Thank you. For votes 4 in favour of the amendment, 57, against 0, abstentions 7. So the amendment has been carried. Thank you. We'll now hear from a round of speakers on the motion as amended, and please feel free to keep your speeches short or reserve your remarks. So first we'll go to Councillor Zoe Peat to speak on behalf of the Labour Group.
I would like to begin by thanking the members of the public gallery for your continued outspoken dedication on this. Your passion is appreciated. For those who For those I have not told, I am patrilineally Jewish. This means that under halakha, which is Jewish law, I am technically not Jewish. Despite this, historically, and still in certain parts of the world, I am Jewish enough to be persecuted for it. The discourse that surrounds some corners of the internet would have me pitted against my Abrahamic brothers and sisters, and this is something that I simply refuse to engage in. I offered to speak alongside Councillor Al-Maghrabi as I believe it's important to show that people of both Palestinian and Jewish heritage want both the same things, a lasting peace where all communities can live together side by side. Instead of being pulled into a debate where I'm forced to support the existence of one people over another, I choose to be pro-people and anti-tyranny. I can support the efforts to return the hostages of the October 7th Hamas attacks, as well as the Jewish diaspora and those who have suffered abuse and loved ones in this conflict. All the while calling for a ceasefire, supporting the ICC arrest of Netanyahu and admonishing the war crimes that have resulted in Gaza. From the killing and banishing of journalists, the killing of innocent civilians, and the collective punishment of Palestinians, fundamentally, the means of killing over 45,000 Palestinians simply will never justify the ends. The cycle of violence has gone on too long, and too many children have died. With the news that is circling today, I do hope that we are on the precipice of a ceasefire. However, world leaders must come together to ensure that any ceasefire that is agreed is permanent. The key points of this motion are the Avon Pension Fund investments and the support of a ceasefire. We at Bristol Labour Group will always support a ceasefire as we desperately wish to see an end to the suffering of the Palestinian citizens and the return of the hostages. We also agree that the Avon Pension Fund should seek to obtain more ethical investments such as in green technology, vital infrastructure and other avenues that can enrich the lives of Bristolians without making them a shareholder in this conflict. Bristol Council does not directly control this fund, and it is not our money to dictate how it's spent. However, we can use the weight and power of the council to place pressure and leverage change where we can. Therefore, it is with great pride that we, within Bristol Labour Group, will be supporting this motion as amended. Thank you.
Thank you. And now Councillor Andrew Brown on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I had a speech written for this section of the debate, but it largely mirrors what Councillor Williams said, and he said it more eloquently and drew on personal experience that I don't have. Likewise, Councillor Al-Maghrabi and Councillor Pete's speeches were powerful and prescient in the debate. So I'm going to largely reserve my remarks, safe to say thanks to members for supporting the amendment, which I believe strengthens the original motion by providing that crucial additional context and by making the actions much more achievable and tangible for us as a council. So I'm going to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Councillor Mark Weston.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. I think I've probably already covered my points on this, so I won't belabour it. I, like everyone else here, hope for peace. I hope the mediation becomes successful. I'll be watching the BBC News with avid interest for the rest of the day. For me, it is about balance. I don't think this is quite there, but it's certainly an improvement on the original motion. I commend everyone's efforts. I wish we'd been involved in the discussion to try and draft the altered motion earlier. Thank you very much, everyone.
Thank you, Mark. Councillor Gemfrey, would you like to respond as mover of the motion?
Yes, just to thank all the colleagues across the chamber who are supportive of this motion. I know that this has been several months in the making and it's finally here, so really appreciate that. And yeah, I look forward to hopefully continuing the good fight at the Avon Pension Fund. Thank you very much.
Thank you. So we now move to the vote. This will be an e-vote. Please ensure you're in your allocated seat. This is recorded accurately. You're voting on the motion and the vote will be open for 15 seconds. Please vote now. So that's 57 for, 0 against and 6 abstentions. Thank you very much. That has been carried. Thank you. Yeah. Thank you very much to members of the public for showing respect and restraint, and we managed to get through it, and I really appreciate that. So thank you so much. We've got one item of business still to get through, and that's the silver motion on mental health awareness and suicide prevention. This is an altered motion with agreement of party groups. The motion will be shown on the screen in the room during the speech. I'd like to ask Councillor Tom Renard of the Labour Group to move the motion. Tom.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. Mental health matters, and it is vital that we treat it with the same importance and attention as our physical health. There's plenty of evidence that shows that by looking after our minds, it brings those benefits as well to how we look after ourselves and how that manifests in its well-being. And this is something that hits very close to home for me. As well as having my own lived experience, I've experienced firsthand what happens when someone you care about takes their own life. And for me, in an 8-month period, saw one of my friends disappear, and then my best friend take their own life in my early 20s. And it's something that you never, you know, the feeling, the experience that you go through is something you never wish upon anyone. It's truly awful. It destroys and wrecks lives. For something that is ultimately a temporary feeling, quite a permanent ending. And that's what got me involved actually in campaigning. It's what got me involved in politics. Because I think we can all do our bit to do better, to help prevent suicide. And whether anyone thinks it's realistic or not, our goal should always be to aim for 0 suicides in this country. Now, for the first time in about 25 years, we saw suicide rates increase in the 2023 data, and that is not acceptable in this country or anywhere, and it's something that I want us to really think about how we can all work together to do better. And there's a number of things that are in the motion that I talked to, and I thank colleagues as well that have inputted to help improve the motion and really get that cross-party buy-in, because for us there is so much we can do. There's no reference to a letter to government. I think colleagues may be pleased to hear. I know it's often a feature of motions. Good question. But what I did want to do is ensure that we focus on practical action that we can take as a council. And so there were several things I brought back proposals on. We used to have mental health champions here. Let's reappoint mental health champions. Let's have at least one for each of our groups that can work collaboratively to bring forward mental health initiatives and also do that work around the suicide prevention strategy that needs refreshing later this year. Let's make sure that we're hosting suicide prevention summits, that we really encourage partnership work in. I convened the first regional suicide prevention summit back in 2019. It would be good to see those happening so we can really focus in on areas where we can have the most impact with limited resources. Let's make sure that we improve training for councillors and staff. Whilst we are not there as councillors in the sense of mental health support workers, it is important that we have support and training to be able to carry out our roles, because we come into contact with people with significant mental health problems, facing a range of issues, and the more that we can have in terms of support to feel empowered to be able to carry out our roles and support people effectively is only going to be a good thing. And if you'll just indulge me if I've got a few more lines, Lord Mayor. I want to also make sure that we are scrutinising mental health services. There have been several high-profile cases over the years in Bristol which we have seen significant challenges around, whether that is student suicides, whether that is children and adolescent mental health services and the significant problems that have been had at Riverside as well. It's important that those get the focus and attention so we can help work with our health partners to get those issues resolved. And also, something that's been brought up within our group is thinking about the Thrive at Night work, which is brilliant what's happening, the support for hospitality workers. Let's expand it. Let's look at what we can do for less traditional roles in the nighttime economy. So just to finalise, Let's work together, let's work collaboratively to improve mental health support, its visibility, and do our bit to prevent the devastation caused when people see no other route than to take their own life. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Tom. And now the other Tom Blenkinsop, to second the motion. Councillor Blenkinsop, please.
Thank you, Lord Mayor. It took me some time to write this speech. I wasn't sure what to include, what to exclude. How much did people really want to hear about my personal problems, my experiences with mental health? And that question is part of the equation. It's part of the problem, because many men will struggle with mental health. We often hear that men do not talk about mental health enough, that there's a stigma around talking about it. It's one of the reasons I wanted to help bring this motion forward. I don't know how many men here in this chamber and in Bristol suffer from mental health problems. I suspect it's widely underreported. We've all heard the, I'm fine, it's just been a rough day, rough week, rough month. We know as well that we have more children with mental health issues than national average, and that number is growing, the gap is widening. We've heard about the nighttime economy, how many of our warehouse workers in Avonmouth are isolated, performing back-breaking work for the opportunity to also be lonely and underpaid. Many of our students likewise find that their studies are more isolating than they expected. I was one of them. I won't dwell on the past too much, but not every university experience is a positive one, and the care offered by our universities is at best inconsistent. Many people across the city are not getting the support they deserve and the support they need. The motion thus seeks to correct some of these gaps. We've already heard about the mental health champions in each group, proper training on recognising and supporting constituents, and other councillors even with mental health issues will help us all to engage better and more meaningfully. By supporting nighttime workers, logistics, healthcare, industry and others, we will offer better services to more people, and by focusing scrutiny and development of mental health policy in light of the challenges post-COVID, and I've got every confidence in both our officers and the PHC committee on this, we'll be in a strong position to continue the excellent work that's already been done. As a council, in our society, mental health matters. We've heard from Tom already. I could be extraordinarily cold-blooded and discuss the finances again, but I'd like to hope that everyone could be persuaded by the human cost alone. No parent should have to bury their child because those children feel they have no hope for the future. No one should have to hear that their loved ones have chosen to walk into the sea or throw themselves from the suspension bridge because they've grown to think that there is no hope left, or that they are worthless, that they are a parasite, a waste of bloody oxygen, a failure and a burden on everyone around them. I have been at that precipice, and I only came back from it because I had friends and family who saw the signs and stepped in. Unfortunately, not everyone is or will.
Tom, if you just want to hold on a second, we'll see if we can sort your mic out.
You can come up here, Tom.
Thank you, and thank you all for your patience on this. Suicide and depression are not the only manifestations of mental health addiction, including gambling addiction, as stated. But there is also anger and radicalisation, abuse and self-abuse, and withdrawal from society. Ongoing chronic mental health conditions are not simply rhetoric, but an unfortunate reality for far too many of the residents, far too many people in Bristol. As councillors, we are in a position where we can make a change in people's lives. And while this motion is by no means a complete panacea, it is a set of effective improvements on our practice, and I sincerely hope it will make a difference, that someone will be reached out to who would have otherwise been missed, that we will save lives because of what we put here. I think that's something we can all get behind, and I urge colleagues to support the motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Okay, we'll now hopefully hear from speakers on the motion. So firstly, Councillor Francis is going to speak on behalf of the Green Group. Lorraine, is your mic working? No, so we're going to bring a microphone to you and hopefully that will work.
Sorry. Okay, I stand in support, well, I stand to talk to this motion. So this is an incredibly important issue to residents across the city and for many members and officers in the chamber. Many of us have personal experience of the issue and have been negatively impacted by the manner in which this has been raised. Therefore, it is an issue which needs to be raised it needed to be raised in a sensitive and appropriate manner. I don't think members bringing forward the motion here was being mindful of using trigger statements, and as you can see, I'm quite severely impacted on this. Those of us wishing to make change would do well to understand that there are many activities already happening. Thank you. Thanks. To raise additional actions that could be taken in the correct committee, where a lot of work is being proposed to be done. A large focus of this is upon councillors. And so therefore, we are able, so that to ensure that we are able to be good advocates for the mental, for the mental well-being of our city. I think that work starts right here in the chamber, and that I think there are so many Green councillors you'd never believe who have lost loved ones through suicide, and it's such for the motion to be focused on the training we should do and so forth. I felt we could have best dealt with this outside of the chamber in the first instance, and potential actions come into the chamber if we needed to raise attention to the issue, which is such a devastating issue. I'm not going to talk about who we've lost in our families and many of our members. So we will be voting for this motion, but I would ask that we use the processes and systems that we have worked really hard to develop over the last 7 months and avoid bringing sort of really unnecessarily triggering motions, which are well needed, and I fully support it. So we will be voting for the motion. Thank you.
Oh, I'm back to normal service. Okay, Lorraine, thank you so much. That really moving speech. Let's move on to Councillor Collard, please, on behalf of the Labour Group.
I think I'm working. I totally feel Lorraine and that very emotional. I think tonight's been emotional on a lot of levels. Doing this kind of work, counselling, working across the city, working with people, having our own lived experiences, we are going to get caught up in emotional stuff. But we keep going because we want change. So I'm supporting this motion because I believe we do not do enough to support those with mental health issues. I work with young people for whom mental health is an issue. Many having problems with coping with stress, anxiety, hypervigilance and low mood. Many do not see this as a concern, and some simply do not understand how connected this is to today's society and the impact of social media, deprivation and unemployment. Trauma, especially childhood trauma, encompasses a broad spectrum of adverse experiences that occur during the formative years of a person's life. Much of this can be overcome with the support of trusted and informed adults. It can come in all shapes and sizes, and it can impact along a whole spectrum of intensity based on mindset, coping skills, resilience and grit, and also personality. As many of you know, I am a mother with 5 daughters. All have had their struggles with mental health. As a parenting, this is challenging. But having the right support, my girls have come through their ups and downs. That is not always the case for all of our children. Especially young men, those that struggle and don't look for help because they don't think they should. A friend of mine lost her father to suicide, and it was debt related, and he felt he had nowhere to go. And we know times are hard now, and we worry more about our men that are committing suicide because they feel that they are that worthless when they're not bringing home enough to the family home. The rise in male suicide is actually scary, and we need to change the way we think. We need to change the ways other people think, and we need to change the way we manage how we're supporting others. My husband struggled with mental health, and at 37 died of an overdose. I'm not looking for sympathy.
Susan, we'll get the mic to you right now. Sorry about these technical difficulties, everyone.
Okay. So my husband struggled with mental health and died at 37 of an overdose. It was classed as accidental. I'm not looking for pity or sympathy. I'm looking for understanding. Understanding in what happens to a family after suicide. Not only should we be working on preventing suicide, because we don't want it to happen in the first instance, we should be focusing on families that are left after suicide. I firmly believe that as an organisation, we here at Bristol City Council and the wider community of organisations and charities should be working together to find ways to combat suicide and support our residents who are struggling to manage their mental health. And this support should be citywide. Thank you.
Thank you, Susan. And now, Councillor Classic on behalf of the Liberal Democrat Group.
Lord Mayor, given the sort of heaviness of how a lot of people I think are feeling and what this day has been, I'll try and keep what I was going to say quite brief actually, and say that we will be supporting this motion. The aims and the scope very much align with our party and our long-standing beliefs and political affiliations, so it will be something that we very much support. And it's clearly obvious from the speeches that we've had today that so many of us in this chamber have had that experience, whether it's our own mental health or loved ones, friends, family, and I'm sure most of us will probably have dealt with residents as well in the throes of ill mental health. So there's a lot been going on today. I will say that in a previous role, when I worked for the council, I was encouraged by my manager to take the mental health first aid training. My manager himself had dealt with depression a lot and wanted his staff to be able to support staff that they managed. And I will say I found it not just very informative, it gave me a real understanding of the struggles that people might face, but also the tools to deal with it in the position that I held. And so I'm very supportive of the section about councillors becoming mental health champions, because I think if there is any sort of cultural change in this city, we as councillors do need to be at the heart of it, and that involves skilling us and giving us the tools to be able to fulfil that role. So we will be supporting this motion. Thank you.
Thank you, Sarah. And Councillor Norris to speak on behalf of the Conservative Group.
Thank you, my Lord Mayor. The issue of mental health is a growing public health crisis. We have seen via COVID just how much damage lockdown caused for young people who may not have yet fully recuperated. I can see that in my own 4 boys, so who are now sort of late teenagers. When that coincides with the stagnation of mental health issues being identified and the support, it does create a very difficult environment. So we support the motion, but just a couple of points within that motion I'd like to ask further questions on. So firstly, I think many councillors here agree that maybe the most emotional or time-consuming work we do is with council tenants. And actually, I think we often feel quite impotent by what we can do to help them. And I would like to see some support given to councillors who deal with those type of volumes. Just yesterday, I received a message, which has been anonymised. Have you got a phone number for the head of housing, please, Graham? My health is getting worse and severely depressed. Don't know how much more I can take. I probably get 2 of those a month. And there may be other people here who get similar or more. And it's hard. If you want to be a decent, hard-working councillor, it's hard to close the emotional door on things like that. So if there's one thing that we can do to really help our tenants and our residents, who are already perhaps the most vulnerable, amongst the most vulnerable in the city, is to sort out the issues within the housing revenue account. Sorry, I'm just getting a bit old now. Yeah, turning to the motion, support many of the aspirations. I know people who have died and seeing those left behind by suicide. And the 3/4 of suicides are male. That's a shocking statistic. It really is. And I can feel the pressure when I was younger, but I had a loving, supportive family. But one thing I'm concerned about is I don't know whether we have already been in contact with our public health team. But I'm glad to hear that it's something you will be working with. But I think there's a lot of simple things that we can do. So Bristol City Council can help disseminate messages. So I've got contacts with football teams and rugby teams. Now, if Bristol City Council had all of those email addresses, they could send out an email about mental health warning, and it could reach thousands of people within minutes. So in summary, we are happy to support. But please be cognizant that smaller parties may not have capacity to appoint a champion for mental health due to other commitments. I haven't got the capacity to do it because I need to protect my own mental health at the moment. So thank you very much.
There we are. So, thank you to all those that contributed during the debate. It is, yeah, it's obviously been quite an emotional day. There's been a lot we've been considering some really important topics. The thing I would say, though, is we do need to talk about suicide, because if we don't, we are not going to address it. and this has often been the problem. We've got better at talking about mental health, about anxiety, about depression. Have we got better at addressing the things around serious mental illness, around some of these more complex challenges? I think we still have a way to go. And Lorraine, the offer is there if you'd like to meet, same Stephen as the chair of the other relevant policy group. I'm happy to sit down with you and officers and discuss this, these issues, because there's a lot that I'm bringing as well from sort of my professional background, having set up a mental health charity that was run by and for people who lived experience of mental health problems and have interfaced with this council before I was a councillor, as well as the ICB, I think they're currently going by as the latest acronym, and other versions. And what I'm keen and passionate about is to see this work move forward. I don't really want us to spend our time swiping at each other about this topic. It's too important from my perspective. And you know, there's some work that we could do and look at doing. You know, we ran campaigns looking at going to Bristol Rovers, Bristol City, Bristol Bears, doing outreach, because often a big problem with mental health awareness is you're often talking to the people that are already converted, and actually that outreach work where people go, where there's that footfall, is really important as well. So we're reaching beyond those that probably already signed up to the cause and wanting to do things about it. I think my only other reflection is, I know this isn't an easy topic, and it can be triggering, and you know, some of us have been fighting this for a long time, and it never gets easier. You know, my friends Johnny Willis died in 2010, and I've had other people that I've lost since, and I'll never stop fighting to make sure that this council is focused on the issues that matter and it can actually do something about. Thank you.
Thank you, Tom. Obviously, it's been quite an emotional debate, isn't it? And people are visibly affected by the issues raised. Please remember, support is available to members. Contact Democratic Services. We have a council employee assistance programme as well. Please make use of those programmes, that help that is available to everyone. Thank you. So because of the technical difficulties, is everyone happy with an aye-nay vote? So, all those in favour of the silver motion, please say aye. Aye. All those against, please say nay. The ayes have it. Congratulations. Well done. So, yes. Thank you, Kai. Yes, well done. Yep, so it just remains me to say that that's the end of today's meeting. Thank you very much for attending, everybody, and in the public gallery. The next meeting for Council will be held on Tuesday, the 25th of February. Thank you.